What's the number one most important thing when you're talking about lighting? Other than having a light, that's probably the most important. But the number one most important thing when talking about lighting is really simple. It's brightness. For example, I have three lights on me right now, not including the motivational lighting behind me. I have my key light, I have my fill light, and I have my ring or hair light is what I call it. My key light is set at 1%. 1%. My fill light is set at 5%. My backlight or my hair light set at 50%. Why did I choose these variables? Let's walk through it and maybe I can help you out a little bit when you're setting up your lighting. So the first thing you want to do when you're setting up your lighting is literally turn off all your lights. That's the number one thing. Any lights in your house, turn them off. Any key light, fill lights, ring lights, turn them all off. If you have any overhead lights, turn them off. If you have any shades or windows, pull the shades down. Turn everything off. Start from zero. Now, depending on how many lights you have, I have three. It's a professional level studio, but most likely you're probably just going to have one. And that's probably your key light. And that's your main light source for all your videos and your Zoom and Teams meetings. Turn that on and hit it to 1%. Now, I have a very powerful light, so 1% actually works for me. Obviously, depending on how powerful of light, 1% probably is not going to work for you. The real goal is to get it as close as possible before it's not distracting to your eyes or to the camera view for glare or anything like that. So get it as close as possible as you can and then turn it on to 1%. Also, depending on the position of the light is going to depend on the brightness. For example, my key light is at a 45-degree angle because I love these cinematic shadows that are on the side of my face. You might not like that, so play with it. Put it in front of you if you have to, but I like it at least at 20%, sometimes 45%, to create that cinematic effect for my videos. So this is at 1%. I have a remote control right here that I can control the brightness, and I'm going to kick it up to maybe 10%. Give you an example of what 10% looks like. So here's 10%. Let's kick it up to 20, 20%, 30%. You can see it's starting to wash out now. Now 40% completely unusable. So kick it down to a percentage that looks great for your skin tone. So between 1 and 10% seem to work best for me. Now let's turn on the fill light and see what difference that makes. Okay, this is the fill light. You can see some of the shadows over here were taken away. This is at 5%. Let's kick it up to 10% and see what it looks like. That's 10%. That's 20%. That's 30%. So now you can see that the fill light has taken away most of the shadows that I created from the key light. Again, I like that cinematic effect with some shadows on the side of my face, so 30% to me seems too high. I'm gonna kick it back down. So 5% to me works best for my skin tone as well as my office setup. I like 5% because there's some shadows on my face, but both of my cheeks are kind of filled out. You can see this area right here is full of light. If I kick it down to 3%, for example, I create more shadows and draw on my face. Again, there's not a 0 or 1 of a right or a wrong answer. Do what looks best to your face and your environment. So now I'm going to leave it at 10%. So my fill light's at 10%, my key light's at 10%. Let's turn on my hair light or my trim light back here. So now you can see a marked difference in the brightness. Now that my trim light or hair light's on, it's created a marketable difference in the brightness overall. So now we have to bring those down. So now I brought my fill light back down to 3% to compensate for the hair light behind me. What the hair light does is create this visual effects around on the back of your hair and shoulder. That hair light creates that 3D depth that I'm looking for. Again, more cinematographic or Hollywood type. So let's take a look at the difference. I'll turn it off right now too. Could you tell the difference? I'll turn it back on. Look at my hair when I do. I like this look better. Notice I haven't talked about any camera settings like ISO or white balance. That's a different course and a different video. I just wanted to talk about lighting brightness today. So let's just do a quick recap of all the lights. This is just with one light, my key light at 1%. This is with my key light and my fill light, 1%, 10%. This is the final result. Key light, fill light, hair light. So for my office, I think this gives me the best look for overall brightness of all my lights. Now, this might not be your office. You might just have one. So play with the direction, play with the brightness, get whatever works best for you. This works best for me. Well, I hope you learned something about setting brightness today in your home office. It's probably the most important thing to make your picture look good. So Have fun with it. Experiment with it. It's not a 0 or a 1. There's no right or wrong answer. You're just going to have to play with the positioning and brightness to fit whatever works best for you. Well, I hope you learned a little something today about brightness. I'm Patrick Kelly, the Tattooed Nerd.